Good evening, everyone. My name is Dundrup. I'm the SPC here at Thupten Norbu Ling. So I have the honor and the privilege of welcoming Venerable Angie back to our virtual Gompa. Venerable was kind enough to do a puja for us a couple of months ago, but this is the first course that we've been able to have with Venerable Angie in quite some time. She does have a storied history with us at TNL. She served as the SPC the number of years ago. So we do also owe her a debt of gratitude for moving the center forward during that time, keeping everything on track. We were able to inherit the fruits of her labor during that time, and so we've only been able to build upon the people who came before, and Venerable Angie is certainly part of that tradition. So we're grateful for all of her contributions. She's been a nun for over 25 years, a teacher, senior teacher in our tradition. And she did just say in front of many people that she would like to visit. So I wrote that down. And so next time or sometime in the near future, it won't be the virtual Gompa, it will be the physical Gompa when we can get Venerable Angie here in Santa Fe. So we'll hold that in our hearts, and we'll make fervent prayers for Venerable Angie's visit. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation to teach. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Venerable Dundrup, but that's a very gracious introduction. I hope I can live up to that, you know. I mean, just most of my life as a nun has been very much being in service in the Dharma. I'm not a well-established teacher, but you know, I'm trying to get into that a little bit. But basically, yeah, I've been doing much more on the service side, serving predominantly at Lama Zopa Rinpoche's houses. I did have a time, a couple of years at Thupten Norbu Ling, where I worked with Venerable Rowena when she was director. But predominantly, I was doing a lot of service at Lama Zopa Rinpoche's house, cleaning and making the offerings and doing the garden. And so I've been more sort of hands-on for many years. So I don't know if I can quite live up to what Venerable Dundrup said there with the teaching, but we'll get there step by step. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. And it was lovely to have a visit there with space. And I know we're coming from all over, and I know that you have many different teachers popping in for these modules. So what's helpful for me, because I don't know most of you, is if you don't mind, just giving me a little introduction. So also I'm Scottish. So I hope you're going to be okay. I will try to not speak too quickly. I think people usually enjoy hearing it, but you need to be able to understand it as well, you know. So I hope I try to speak not too quickly and clearly, and hopefully it'll work, you know. Just bear with me. So what would be helpful for me is just to go through everyone and introduce. I mean, I can see your names on the screen, but of course you just say your name. You know, if you've been coming to how many of the modules you've been coming to, are you new, or you're doing the whole program, and a little bit, maybe just in a sentence, how long you've been practicing the Dharma, or you know, something of your background. If this is your first introduction, your first course, or how long you've been connected with Thupten Norbu Ling, something like that. Just in about a minute, you know, a few sentences each. That's okay. Space, could you start? You're first. Oh no, actually, Shayla, you're first on my screen. I know
Okay,
you're the host,
that's
but
okay. I don't mind going first. I'm Shayla. I'm in northern Utah, and I found the Dharma in 2018. And in 2020, I found Thupten Norbu Ling, and I've been attending courses since then and hosted pretty much all of the discovering and most of the courses that they and so, but I am not a lot of it sticks, so I'm still learning. So that's where I'm at.
thank you. Space,
Am I muted or not?
you're good.
Okay. I love Angie and love the time that you were at when we were all at 2nd Street. I guess I've been in the Dharma oh, not quite 20 years. And Sheila, you just do so much for us. Thank you.
It sounds like it, yeah.
It's
Thank
all
you.
there, doing all this stuff that I don't understand. So I'm just very ecstatic to be hearing Angie again.
Matt.
Yeah, my name is Matt. I'm from Germany. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I've been practicing daily since 2015. And before that, I have been, I must say, dabbling with the Dharma off and on for years, but I never quite found access to it. Since 2015, I feel I am on the path and I am trying to do the full program. And yeah, class 7, I will continue.
Great, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
T.
Hello,
T. Joy.
Venerable.
Hi.
Hey, thank you for being here, and I can understand you well. I love Scotland and Ireland. I'm not sure what year I started following the 14th Dalai Lama, but that's been a while. But the first time I've taken maybe formal classes was 2022. And then I was blessed to find TNL, I think a little over a year ago. And I did enjoy discovering Buddhism 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so I'm glad to be here in class with you all today. Thank you.
Good. And Robert?
You can hear me. Hello, Venerable. I'm in Gilbert, Arizona. And I've been with the center for a little over a year now. Most of my training or background, I guess, is mindfulness, more the secular.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of Zen, maybe a little Zen formal training, but all of it's really been through the center now. For the last year, I think I've pretty much attended every class. And then, so it's been quite amazing going from the mindfulness to this. Much more powerful. So, nice to meet you.
Thank you. And Joy Serum.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, we were very fortunate to discover or to begin coming to this center to attend Ling. I had investigated some other kinds of teaching, Shambhala, Vipassana, and nothing was completely clicking. And this place has just been amazing. All of the teachings, the retreats. We started in April, and it's just been a constant joy and really feels like a refuge. Loved every one of our teachers. This is our first module. As far as the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, I feel like I'm about in kindergarten or first grade. So I just want to learn as much as I can possibly learn, and I hope it's okay to jump in with this module and just keep going.
Yes.
And I'm
Great.
Purdy, and I will echo and amplify everything that Joey has said. It has
Okay.
been wonderful, even when we went to Seattle, being able to join from there, thanks to Shayla, was made me feel like I was right at home, and I feel at home in the practice and in the center and in the Dharma.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Samantha?
Hi, Venerable. I'm
Hi.
Northern Alberta in Canada. I've been studying Buddhism from about 2020, and I came to TNL via Geshe Tenzin Zopa. And I've been with TNL for about a year and a half. And for discovering Buddhism, I've done, with Matt and Robert, we've been here since module 1, so going through the whole thing.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. And Kevin?
I'm Kevin. I'm in Northwest Indiana. I've been at a Buddhist several years. Started through the Indiana Buddhist Center in Indianapolis. And so far I've been in the since module 1, since DB1.
Okay, thank you. And Donna?
Yes, hello. My name's Donna. It's nice to see all of you. I just moved to the Santa Fe area about 2 years ago and discovered the center. And I participated in the meditation class that just rounded out. I started studying Buddhism in about 2002 after my son was born, really focusing on the work of Thich Nhat Hanh. And then I went into Tibetan Buddhism, and there was a really great Tibetan Buddhism center in Louisville, Kentucky, where I lived. Um, and I've been really into that, mostly self-study. And then my partner that I met, he came into Buddhism, and we kind of got into some teachings that he was into. But when we found the center, we were really excited. So I'm really looking forward to being a part of the community and hearing what you're going to teach tonight. And this is really my introduction to a class. So
Okay.
I'm really looking forward to it. Thank
Welcome.
you.
Welcome. Deshi. Desh? Is it Desh maybe? Is there a
Can you
few
hear me?
people? Yes, yes.
Oh, here I am. Okay. So I started with formal Buddhism after my husband passed in 2001, so the beginning of 2002. I've done the Discovering Buddhism through this center. I went to Santa Fe last year for Yamantaka, and recently I did a child initiation with Waldorf in British Columbia. And I don't have a center particularly near me. San Francisco is an hour or so. Sacramento is further. So I've been very happy to have Zoom access to get formal constructed structured.
So where are you from, Desha? Where are you coming
I'm
from?
sorry, I'm in Northern California, near Oakland.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And Susan.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
Yeah,
What
you
was the
just popped on.
question?
Just an introduction to where you are. What's your kind of have you been doing this course? Or what's your general background in Buddhism?
Okay, well, I'm Susan and I'm from Monterey. I mean, I've been here the last 15 years, Monterey area.
Okay.
And so I was just outside just now on the most beautiful day. The wind isn't too bad, the sun, it was gorgeous. And I thought, but I really want to get to this class. And I'm sorry I was late, but anyway, what motivated me, I have to really focus in on that. I need the calm it gives to my mind in very times of trouble and big changes in the world, big trouble in the world, and personal changes for me too. I want to focus on I want to say my religion, but it's actually, philosophy or something more like that, and be reconnected to this positive energy field so that I can project that to others as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, so Kevin, I think Kevin didn't give an introduction yet. Kevin? Oh yeah, Kevin.
No, Kevin did.
Kevin did, sorry.
Yes.
Jennifer? Yes, Jennifer.
Hey, I'm Jennifer. So I'm from the Davis, Sacramento area. And I studied Buddhism for a couple years in my early 20s. And then I found Buddhism again, maybe a year before I found this particular center. But yeah, I love this particular center. And I'm taking all the classes except for there's one class that I didn't take. And I did the preliminary classes as well. But I'm still like a beginner or a newcomer to Buddhism. Still figuring out if it's for me in my life. So I just wanted to put that.
Okay,
There's
thank you.
that aspect. So
Thank
yeah.
you. And
Thank
then
you.
Neem, and if Neem and Ephesia.
Are you gonna go first?
Yeah,
Hi.
so hi, Venerable.
Hi.
We're currently in Bali, Indonesia. He's from the UK, I'm from the US, but we live in Australia. We've been practicing for a long, long time. We've been with Thupten Norvalin since 2018, I think.
Mm.
Done, we've done discovering Buddhism a couple times around, just not in sequence. We've just done the classes when they appear here and there.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was in Perth, Western Australia,
Mm-hmm.
and FPMT through there, and I took Refuge with Venerable Rabina and met Venerable Katie at the same time, and followed them through, and that's how I found Thupten Nobling. And currently, we're doing a long-term retreat in Bali. And what we're trying to do is to try and connect with as many teachings as possible. So last month we finished All About Karma, DB7. Sorry, Discovering Buddhism. And then this month we're hoping to work with you. I have come across your teachings on YouTube, Venerable. So it's really good to be able to do some work with you in online. Thank you.
Thank you both. Now, sometimes it jumps around a bit. I think Scarlett wanted to introduce herself just through the chat. Is that right, Sheila?
Scarlett's asked to be skipped.
Yes. Has someone else introduced themselves through the chat? Was that Mary Beth?
Yes, but we've lost her.
Okay, she dropped out. Is there someone else who would like that I may have missed? I'm thinking I have everyone now. Anyone want to just go on if they've missed you? But I think that might be everyone. Yeah, Sheila, got everyone? Looks like, yeah. Okay, great. So anyway, it just helps me to get a sort of sense of where everybody is, you know. So I know it takes a little bit of time because there's quite a few of you. So thank you everyone for sharing, giving an introduction. So usually how I like to start the classes is, well, a little bit meditation, maybe about 15 minutes of meditation. So of course, we're going a little bit more into the class. It'll take a bit longer to start the teaching tonight. This class is usually a little bit shorter in terms of the teaching time because I usually on the first classes, I say, like to do introductions. And we do a bit of meditation, which I usually do every class, or try to start the next class with a little bit meditation on what we did in the previous class. But this one, it'll just be a general introduction meditation. And then I use PowerPoint. So I try my best to use it. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but it kind of try and give you something else to look at, you know, and visually it can help with as well, you know, to kind of digest the points a bit more. So I do use PowerPoint as part of the class, you know, so sometimes it's a bit clunky for me, but I try my best to go in and out of the trip. So there'll be some PowerPoint slides as well during the class. So let's just get ourselves into a little bit of a meditation position. Whatever's comfortable for you. So sometimes the mind can be a little bit sleepy at night time. I mean, we're all on different times here, but most of us are in the States, so we're more in the evening time. So if it's helpful, you can do the 9-round breathing. I'm not going to take time to explain that, but if you're familiar with it, you can do that. Or just simply a few deep breaths through the body, just to ground, relax, and open through the body. And maybe a minute just being with the breath, you know. So whatever one is working better for you. So the whole Buddhist path, the spiritual path, the Lam Rim, gradual path to enlightenment that we're studying in this course, the whole premise, it comes from the premise that we have this potential, innate Buddha nature, this essence within us that can experience a kind of, an everlasting peace and happiness. We all have that potential. Because deep down, when we really check up, every action in your body, speech, and mind is guided with this intention, this wish, this deep need, for happiness, a desire for happiness. So actually, we want to really tune in to that desire for happiness in a deep way when we're exploring this module of Refuge. And the fact that there is an opportunity for us, kind of this path to peace and happiness, this potential is really within the palm of our hands, because we have consciousness, we have mind, we have Buddha nature. That's what we discovered, what we explored in the first module, this potential for everlasting peace and happiness that's innate within us all. It simply needs to be developed in the right way. Because right now that road to everlasting peace and happiness is kind of blocked for us. It's not really clear. We have these strong habitual tendencies, certain states in mind, that we're so familiar with it, that block, that road to inner peace and happiness, it's kind of choked up, We can't really see it clearly. Our karmic tendencies, our karma that we explored in the last module, our states of mind, attachment, anger, aversion, and especially the deeper one, ignorance grasping at true existence, kind of block our spiritual view right now, our spiritual path. We can't quite see the way through to really open up this incredible potential we have for happiness. And that part is very exciting. That it's within our grasp, but we need guidance. We need a path. So the Lam Rim is the path to unpack our confusion and put our hearts and minds on the right path. And the basis, the foundation, that the Lam Rim comes out of the Four Noble Truths. The foundational teaching of the Buddha. There is suffering. There is a cause of suffering. There are causes. And the good news is that there's a path, and there's a cessation. We can achieve a cessation, all the different levels of states of confusion that are in the mind. And there's a very clear path that we can take out of that. So His Holiness says for Westerners, actually kind of taking hold of the last two truths is important for us first. We need to gain a kind of conviction, a self-confidence that total peace, freedom from suffering, freedom from disturbed states of mind, and this kind of potential for everlasting peace and happiness is within our grasp, especially in the light of being born human, in the light of having a precious human rebirth. And the second two truths, or the first two, the truth is suffering, causes of suffering. What they're really doing is just labeling for us the problem that we have right now, allowing us to be clear why the path is blocked to this potential for happiness, this great potential for peace and calm and, beyond all suffering, So the first two truths are simply labeling the problem. And the second two truths is what we take hold of, that we can liberate ourselves from these challenges, So when we label a problem, it's much easier to deal with. any kind of problem, any sickness, disease, anything, when we know the extent of the problem, then we know that we have to take a path to fix it. It's like just that labeling helps. So that's what the first two truths are, just labeling the problem. And the second two truths are giving us a kind of, should be inspirational, that there's a path out, a path that the Buddha taught, a path that the Buddha took himself, the Dharma teachings. And there's a set of practitioners who are already well established on the path who can support us. So this module on refuge is very much about looking into why we need, how we can rely on a different kind of refuge in our lives, why we need to do that if we want to really tap into our potential for happiness. And how ordinarily what we've done in our lives just isn't quite working. Really getting clear on that, what's not working, and what we need to, develop on the path inwardly. Beginning to entrust ourselves to a different type of refuge, a more exalted type of refuge, what we usually call the three jewels, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche would say, the three rare sublime ones, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Tuning into what happens when we start to take refuge in those three jewels, these three precious ones, how that can start really create a deep impact in our inner transformation, and why we need to do that. If we really want to open up this very exciting potential for happiness that we all have, it's not beyond any living being, it's within the scope of every living being who has mind or consciousness. So we usually start the module with just, tapping into that refuge already. Whatever understanding we have of that, just reciting, here, and we have the image of Shakyamuni Buddha. So we're already taking refuge in the Buddha, in his teachings, by attending these classes. We already have been for some months or years, depending on how long we've been practicing and studying the Dharma. So we're already leaning on the teachings, the wisdom of the Buddha. We've already sought a different type of refuge in our life. It's just deepening that refuge, understanding more clearly why we do it, how we do it, and how it becomes more deep, and how it really influences and opens up our Buddha nature, our potential for happiness. So just feel, if you can, now we have the image of Shakyamuni Buddha here. So we can either just see the image here or try and feel the presence, just like the sun in the space before us, shining brightly, filled with wisdom, filled with the path. The Buddha's golden in color because he's filled with all the wealth of wisdom, all the wealth of bodhicitta. There's nothing more precious than gold. So like that, there's nothing more precious than the awakening and deepening our Buddha nature, the awakening and deepening our spiritual quality, compassion, and really, really being able to open up our potential for wisdom, to see things really how they are, to see how we are in the most deepest, profound way, our true nature. So that's what Buddha embodies, our path, our journey, and the completion of that path. So we recite, wherever we are understanding refuge, we just take a moment to be with the Buddha in the space before us. And we're going to recite 3 times, once in Tibetan, twice in English, the refuge, and just chanting a few mantras, Shakyamuni Buddha's mantra, allowing the light rays from his holy body just to pervade through us, fill all our cells, and kind of uplift our mind, open our Buddha nature, open our hearts and minds so we can more easily digest, absorb, feel, kind of connect with the teachings. So we do refuge 3 times and a few mantras of the Shakyamuni Buddha. mantra. Sangye chodan sogi chonama janju bardu dagi kyapsuchi dagi chinsogi beso namge drula benjir sangye druparsho. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Tayada mene mene maha munaye soha. 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 Okay. So objectives of the course. First one, to understand the concept of refuge and the role it plays in our practice on the Buddhist path. To learn about the nature of each of the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And to appreciate the benefits of taking refuge and to become aware of the refuge commitments and lay vows. So these are the main three areas that we're going to cover in this refuge module. So first of all, when we think about refuge, we usually start with, you know, what do we understand by refuge? How we ordinarily take refuge. I mean, it's something that we're doing all the time. We've done since we've, you know, come out of the womb, really, you know. We have needed to take refuge. Excuse me, it's very hot here, so I'm going to have to drink a bit more. So yeah, we have had to take refuge all our life, you know, from a very young age. We're very familiar with the practice of taking refuge. So it's not something kind of new to us in this life. It's just becoming aware a little bit more. What do we mean by taking refuge? You know, so best way to understand, first of all, is how we ordinarily take refuge right now. And what does refuge mean? It means taking protection, gaining a sense of security in something, someone, having comfort, safety or shelter in someone or something, you know, in our lives. You know, that's kind of what we mean by taking refuge. So it's not something new to us. So again, as it says here, we've taken refuge ordinarily in these different things in our lives through parents, food, money. You know, we've had to rely on these throughout our life. Comfort, partners and friends, possessions. You know, these are different examples of how we ordinarily and normally in our life take refuge. I mean, as a child, we had no choice. You know, we had to, as you know, as it says in some of the analogies. You know, when we come out of the womb, we're a bit like a helpless worm. You know, I saw this in one Lamrim text. I thought it was a wonderful analogy and very humbling. You know, I mean, we absolutely from day one, We need to take refuge in our parents or whoever becomes our guardians from as soon as we come out of the womb. You know, we need them for shelter, for food, for safety, for everything in life, in the early part of your life, you know, just to live, you know, to function, to stay alive. So in that level, we take strong refuge in our parents or our guardians from a very young age and for many years throughout our life. Even in bad weather, you know, another example of refuge, you know, we take refuge, you know, under a roof, and we take refuge in our house, you know, to protect us from the elements. You know, and as we're, so throughout our lives, we're taking refuge in external things, in people, in food, as I mean, on the list here, you know, we rely on these beings for our welfare, for our comfort, you know, and even for, in some levels, our spiritual or at least our emotional well-being. You know, as we grow older, of course, we recognize there's some limitations of relying solely on the parents. So we seek other types of refuge, you know, friends, therapists, husbands, parents, partners. So we're not unfamiliar with that territory of refuge at all. You know, we're doing it every day and every moment, whether it's for temporary satisfaction or for emotional, spiritual, psychological, or just the basic needs of this life. We lean on beings, things, possessions for security, comfort, care, you know, any type of satisfaction. So it's not something foreign to us, this concept of taking refuge. So it's just to kind of tune into what do we mean by taking refuge or relying, you know? So it's a habit we have already. But what happens is why do we come to Dharma classes? You know, why do we seek out another type of, what we're really doing when we come to Dharma classes is, whether we're doing it consciously or subconsciously or just due to the power of a karma or merit for past life, there's different reasons. But I think most of us start to tune into the sort of limitations that these other types of refuge bring, you know. We feel like on some psychological, spiritual level, there's a peace and happiness that's just not coming from those other sources of refuge. So I think if we trace back why we're here, or why we came to the Dharma initially, or why we continually engage in coming to classes, meditation, listening, reflecting, because there's a kind of deeper kind of source of discomfort. We're tuning into these other types of refuge that are just that they have limitations, you know, and we have our limitations. We're limited, you know, we have our karmic limitations, you know, so we're not able to really find through the other ways, other objects of refuge that we've used. We haven't discovered a kind of deep lasting peace and happiness. We're not finding a solution or a satisfying level of comfort, peace, happiness in our life, you know. And also what we do often when we come to classes is we come from a point of like sometimes quite acute suffering, you know, whether it's mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. That's often what draws us to the Dharma, you know, like some kind of suffering point in our life, you know, there's some sort of painful thing that's coming up in our life and we need to seek out a solution. So what we're doing is looking for a different type of refuge here. So how we're going to approach tonight is more about like looking at how we're seeking, how the other types of refuge, in what way they're not really working for us. You know, so we kind of know it on some level right now. Like, of course, when we come to classes, we hear suffering, we hear dissatisfied, we have some understanding of that. But we need to go much more deeper to understand kind of the whole psychological problem of suffering that's going on in our mind, you know, the deep psychology of that, the deep habituation, you know, and start to unlock and unpack that. So what we're looking at, first of all, in this slide, you know, in terms of the 8 worldly concerns, is how we've mistakenly kind of searched for a refuge right now that's not really working, you know, really just getting more clear on that. So some of us have already heard about the 8 worldly concerns, you know, they come up often in the teachings. And some of us already can see that they're quite dominant in our lives through power of familiation, the environment we work in. There's different reasons, you know, so why we can sort of identify these. I'm going to go through them in a moment, you know, these different concerns. But the basic idea with the 8 worldly concerns, the ordinary refuges that we're engaged in most of the time, is to kind of really see that they don't bring about everlasting peace and happiness. They're very limited in how they can satisfy us emotionally, spiritually, and even on a physical level, you know, these type of concerns, the 8 worldly matters that we're mostly engaging. And that the problem is that we kind of cling and grasp it. We have a habituation with thinking that these are going to bring about happiness. So we need to investigate that a little bit deeper to kind of, first of all, as I say, recognize what refuges are not working for us, why things are not working for us, in what way they're not working. So the 8 worldly concerns, you know, what are they? Hoping for, expecting, or being attached to positive circumstances. It's this kind of energy of, again, sometimes in different texts it's expressed slightly differently, these concerns, and they're kind of both opposites each other, you know, so hoping for, expecting pleasure, some kind of physical comfort and mental happiness. Hoping for, expecting, or being attached to a kind of gain, material wealth and prosperity. Our attachment or expectation for praise, or a good reputation or fame in one's society. So we may or may not think we have these. But I think if we check up more deeply, we all have a certain amount of all these, you know, and these are all stemming from a habit, or what we call a delusion, the delusionary attachment in the mind, which I think we've, in some of the, I'm sure in some of the modules that's already come up, you know, one of the main kind of delusions in the mind is an attachment and clinging to certainly a sense of self. And then from that stems attachment to external objects or people or praise or reputation, you know. So I'm kind of thinking that's the only way, the main gateway to happiness is through this, you know, through these avenues. And of course, the opposite to those are, which also creates disturbance in the mind, doesn't bring about everlasting peace and happiness, and we're going to look into it a little bit more, is the fearing or having an aversion or resistance to negative circumstances. So we've got the attachment and clinging to the good stuff and a kind of hope and expectation, seeking that more predominantly in our life. And then the fear or the resistance or the aversion that comes up when we have pain, when we have loss in material wealth and prosperity, criticism, a bad reputation. So these are what we call the 8 worldly concerns that mostly, I mean, we may not be predominantly engaging them, but before we met the Dharma, predominantly this is what we thought was the cause of happiness, I would think, for most of us, you know. And you can break them down a little bit more, you know, these are just the key points. But predominantly, I think what brought most of us to Dharma is because we found none of these were really bringing about a sense of everlasting peace and happiness that we wanted. You know, we're on constantly, when we're seeking these and have an aversion to the opposite, we're continually on this turbulence, you know, what we call the waters of samsara, the waters of existence, you know, and it's a turbulent area. We're in turbulence all the time, clinging, aversion, clinging. So it's the mind's in a kind of state of disturbance. And even when we do achieve these things, there's a kind of, it doesn't bring about a long-term peace and happiness or level of satisfaction. So generally speaking, you know, and from the Buddhist point of view, these are recognized as kind of unreliable sources of refuge because they're temporary, you know, they're transient. That's some of the reasons, you know, and even they don't have the power within themselves. I mean, we enjoy a good meal, you know, as Lama Yeshe says in his book, you know, that when the chocolate runs out, you know, we enjoy a good meal, and that's nice, but it doesn't bring about everlasting peace and happiness. We have to have a meal a few days later. You know, we get nice possessions, even if we get all the wealth in the world that we'd like. Now, it's not saying here that we shouldn't allow ourselves material comfort or nice food or, you know, a nice car or good friends. The key point is here is they're not reliable. One of the points is it's not a reliable source of refuge. We can't rely on that. I mean, we see what happens often in relationships, yeah? We see in the world, no matter how much wealth people have, can cause so much more confusion, you know, instead of happiness. And somehow things get old. You know, even things just get old in this life, you know. Even the best, your newest car, you know, your newest friend, there's something shifts, you know, in whatever we acquire externally, friends, and friends, possessions, even reputation, you know, after a while it gets old for us in our mind, you know. There's a level that the happiness dwindles and reduces from whatever we acquire. And even in friendships, you know, we can see that in relationships. It's not, as again, it's not necessarily that from the side of the object or the person that there's a problem, you know. It's about what's going on in our mind and our relationship with that object, our relationship with that person, how we're perceiving it, how we cling to it, how we have expectations, how we rely on that in a way that's unrealistic. And you so sometimes, you know, if we're kind of seeking a reputation, you know, seeking a good reputation, seeking praise, you know. But, you know, if somebody praises you for too long, then you can get tired of that too. It gets old, you know, you don't want to hear it anymore. So there's something in the way that we're approaching the 8 worldly concerns, and it's not necessarily that they're negative for their side, but if we just only seek happiness through those avenues in our life, we're going to bump up against a sort of constant level of dissatisfaction, because they don't have the power from their side to satisfy us. And they're not reliable. They're constantly changing and shifting, as we can see with everything in our lives. So here I have a picture of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you know. So Rinpoche actually has a book called the How to Practice Dharma, and it goes into a lot of detail on this topic of the 8 worldly concerns. You know, how can we really unpack this kind of energy and attachment of our life, and how we kind of cling to these different objects, you know, these different, you know, the concerns, the positive ones, and how we develop this kind of habit of being averse to the other ones, you know, and how that's constantly upsetting our mind, you know, and how also from their side they don't have the power, the ability to satisfy us. And the main thing that they also do is when we're just mainly engaged in that in our life, you know, trying to acquire these different concerns and trying to avoid the painful ones, it keeps us pretty busy. Our whole life's taken up with that. As Lama Yeshe used to say, it's like we end up in this kind of place of yo-yo mind, you know. You know, the mind's up and down all the time, just seeking these, avoiding the others. And we kind of lose the opportunity to really discover something beyond that, something beyond the mind's attachment and aversion, you know, which is the kind of accomplishment, the fulfilling, the development of our Buddha nature. So, you know, it's difficult because society in this culture, in this society, you know, what's mainly advertised, you know, is Lama Yeshe called it the consumer culture. You know, we have a very high consumer culture. So from a young age, we're taught, I mean, it depends on your family situation, but mainly the goal is career, money, reputation. You know, these are big factors. And I think that's why there's a lot of anxiety in life, because not everybody is going to be able to manage that or be successful in those areas of life. You know, and that's what I think brings for the younger generation a lot more anxiety, you know, because there's so much pressure for that, you know, to achieve these things. So really, you know, this course is all about how trying to recognize, first of all, in the beginning and get a kind of a little bit more insight in our own experience, not in a place of beating ourselves up, because those are things we've sought for a long time, you know, and they're not working, but kind of creating a space in our practice to really investigate how the mind's the attachment and aversion, you know, the seeking of these outwardly refuges with a mind attachment and aversion, it's not really working for us, you know, and to get that more and more deep in the mind, you know, this is really what we're looking into. The first two truths is really understanding how our suffering, how our struggle with that is creating this disturbance in the mind, you know, and it's causing a huge avoidance, the main avoidance from spiritual practice. The other thing is as well, you know, it means that we're heavily engaged all the time in trying to find sort of happiness in this life through those, you know, and we're kind of ignoring, you know, we all also discovered in the first module, you know, this potential that we have, this consciousness, it goes from life to life to life, you know, and from the karmic module, we discover also that we carry our karmic imprints for life to life to life, you know, so we don't want to carry this habituation of this sort of wrong way that we grasp at external phenomena, people, possessions, events, praise, reputation, words. We want to release ourselves a little bit more for that habit for future lives. Give our consciousness, our mind, our Buddha nature more breathing space. Find another way to take refuge. Take refuge in more in our innate qualities that can be developed. You know, so, and also, you know, it's continually, as we do this, we're continually creating these seeds or imprints in the mind for attachment and aversion, you know, so that's what we want to move away from as we understand how they influence and kind of, you know, disturb, taint the mind, you know, our purer Buddha nature. And from the long-term view, you know, when we move into the longer, the modules that go on, you know, bodhicitta, wisdom, realizing emptiness, as you move through these modules and you know, we learn about these much more beautiful, exalted states in the mind, like, you know, compassion and bodhicitta, wisdom, realizing emptiness. So the main roadblocks to them are the sort of mind that's continually more absorbed in the kind of basic, fundamental, ordinary happiness of this life through the avenues of the eight worldly concerns. So they are our main roadblocks to spiritual practice. That's why Rinpoche dedicated, as I mentioned, a whole book on how to practice Dharma, how to really understand how attachment is functioning in the mind and how we start to kind of purify that, step back, you know, from these concerns and try to open the space, more space in our life for spiritual practice, for focusing on the beauty that the Buddha nature can open up to, you know, these beautiful minds of bodhicitta and emptiness. So that's why these, in the beginning of the path, all these preliminary modules are focused on trying to understand how we're blocking our path to happiness through these eight worldly concerns. And we try to limit these a little bit more, take a bit more hold of them rather than them holding us through the power of habituation, you know. How can we take hold of those, subdue them a little bit more? And one of the main ways to do, to work with attachment actually is through teachings on impermanence. You know, really trying to connect with letting go of the appearances of this life by thinking about the impermanent nature of life. our life, our body, everything's in a constant flux all the time. And when we move more deeply into the teachings on, or the meditation, the contemplations on death and impermanence, you know, thinking about the time of death being indefinite. You know, we don't know at any time when we can pass away, you know. So certainly in the view and the light of death and impermanence, thinking about it more deeply, our attachments are kind of clinging, our feeling of those bringing about happiness. We get more clear in that mental state, in that place of meditation, where we're thinking about impermanence, we're thinking more about the indefinite nature of our lives. Somehow that clingy mind, that attachment mind, our values shift and change. And that's good. That's a good place to be, but we kind of want to be in that place all the time. That meditation allows us to a little bit release and soften the clinging, grasping mind. So that's actually one of the main antidotes to the 8 worldly concerns, is taking a bit of time to think about the impairments in your life, the definite nature of when you're going to pass away. You know, it helps us to kind of step back and really reevaluate and soften the kind of strong habitual mindy attachment. The habituation with thinking and feeling all these things are going to bring about more happiness. So this is a statue in Bodh Gaya, Root Institute, the Nagarjuna statue that was actually built for Lama Zopa Rinpoche when he manifested a stroke around 2012. Rinpoche manifested a stroke. So this statue was built for Rinpoche's long life at that time. And of course, Nagarjuna was a great master around the 2nd century. And this is one quote from Nagarjuna: acquiring material things or not acquiring them, happiness or unhappiness, interesting or interesting sounds, praise or criticism. These 8 worldly dhammas are not objects of my mind. They are all the same to me. So he's not necessarily here advocating a change of mind, not necessarily a total abandonment of these things, but trying to get a deep understanding, some kind of understanding through our meditation, through our practice, that they're not going to be the cause of they don't bring about everlasting peace and happiness from their side. Right now, how we relate to objects, how we relate to people, how we relate to relationships, mostly is not going to bring about the peace and happiness that we really seek. You know, this longer term peace and happiness, not reliable objects of refuge. And as our minds become a bit more tamed, we generally start to cling less to these. We start to feel that, you know, and as we take us a different type of refuge, as we develop our refuge practice more, our understanding of the Lamrim, we'll find that these types of refuge slowly shift in our mind. You know, we start to feel there's another type of refuge that exists within us, a kind of everlasting peace and joy, you know, that we can create. We are the creators of that. So instead, we want to open up that innate power we have for happiness instead of disempowering ourselves through attachment to these sense door enjoyments, or what we call the temporary fleeting moments of praise and recognition. So it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy them in the moment, but that's not what we're mainly seeking. We understand that their nature is temporary, transient, and they can't bring about everlasting peace and happiness. So we then more clearly want to seek this deeper type of refuge. So just before we go into what refuge is, again, just further clarifying what refuge is not. It isn't rooted in blind faith or simply accepting spiritual authority without some kind of investigation on our part. And the faith that grows out of questioning is stronger than the faith born of blind acceptance. It can withstand the shocks of circumstance. Only he who questions the universe and questions it in utter honesty can grow in his comprehension of the truth. So again, there is less chance from the first quote here. There's a lot less chance for us as Westerners kind of having a kind of blind faith, right? Because we naturally need to investigate Buddhism. We need to investigate the Dharma. We need to investigate the Four Noble Truths for any kind of faith, for most of us, for any kind of faith to blossom. Because we don't have a natural faith. We're not from a culture, generally, who's, where faith is strong right now, So when we come into the Buddhist teachings, we almost have more like it. We're more very apprehensive, actually, most of the time, but that's good, because it causes us to think and question and ask, So refuge is not a blind faith, It's something we develop within our own heart as we understand the teachings more, So there's less chance of us developing a blind faith, but there is occasions when I come across people in the teachings who have a kind of wow experience when they first meet the Dharma, and express a lot of faith and devotion, but honestly, sometimes they don't last, because it's not, our faith, our devotion, our practice, the refuge, all of these take time to develop and deepen in our mind, It's an organic process, absorbing the teachings, listening, reflecting, meditating. That's a very long organic process. And through that process, our refuge, our sense of faith and conviction in the Buddhist teachings grows. So it's not, refuge isn't something that we just feel right away, it grows and develops over time. And as His Holiness says, taking refuge, it's not simply reciting, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha with our mouths. It involves an internal commitment to our spiritual practice that motivates us to humbly seek spiritual guidance. So again, there is a danger of us, even at all levels of practice, there can be a danger. I think His Holiness is talking, maybe not necessarily to new practitioners, but even for some of us who have been practicing for some time, there can be a danger when we get over the honeymoon period of practice that we kind of just do our practices, our commitments, kind of just like a parrot, we kind of parrot them off, So we need to have an active, so that there can be a danger of that happening, So, but really what refuge is this kind of deep commitment to our spiritual practice, and understanding that we have this Buddha nature and it's something we want to put a lot of time, we want to put a certain amount of time and effort to develop and grow it. So for that, we need an active engagement with the Sangha. We need teachers to keep us inspired. We need teachings. We need to take refuge in that. We need to rely on those. We need to lean on them constantly, because in society is telling us something different. Culture's telling us something different. Often our family and friends are telling us something different. So that's why it's so important. As many of you expressed, you're so happy to meet the Dharma, the center, and we need to keep doing that. We need to lean on the center, the monastics, the teachers, or Sangha for spiritual support. We need to keep doing that. It's so important, because in society, that's not the aim, it's not the goal. It doesn't mean that we don't have good-hearted, kind people in society, but to really develop and open and awaken our Buddha nature, to develop some of these, exalted qualities that we're going to discover in the, as we move on in the path, wisdom, realizing emptiness, bodhicitta, even the first level of spiritual happiness, which is the first one we're aiming for in this module, in the lower scope. Anyone, what's the first level of spiritual happiness that we're aiming for in these practices? When we go through the first set of modules, there's 3 levels, or what we call scopes or capabilities of beings. 3 goals that we're trying to achieve in our Lamrim practice. So I'm not going to ask, Venerable Dundrup knows already, but I want to see if anyone can guess what the first level of spiritual happiness is that we're aiming for. Anyone want to put their hand up? Don't see any hands. Zayla. I'm going to ask Zayla. Zayla, do you know? She's not there.
No. I'm going to need the question one more time. I was putting jammies on my grandson. I'm sorry.
No, no worries. So the first level of, maybe someone else, space.
Sorry, I don't.
No, she's not there either.
Yeah.
No.
I'm here,
So
but
when we
I
go
don't
through
know.
the Lam Rim,
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just mention it. Yeah. So what we're trying to develop in the Lam Rim is these 3 levels of spiritual happiness. Yeah, that's the whole goal. So step-by-step levels of happiness in the Lam Rim. The first level of spiritual happiness that we're trying to develop, it doesn't sound obvious right now. It may be not something we're necessarily thinking I'm seeking that, but actually the first level of spiritual happiness is the happiness of future lives.
Oh, right.
That's the goal of the first capable being, the first level of capability. What we're trying to do with our mind, with spiritual practice, is to develop this ability to, or this capability, this potential to have happiness in future lives, to bring our mind to that level so that when we pass away this life, we're guaranteed a good future rebirth. Again, we might not come to the Dharma or the classes with that motivation, right? So it sounds a bit foreign, like, you really? But when we think more deeply about reincarnation, we think about that a bit more, then if we want to be kind to ourselves, so most of us now have come into a human life, yeah? Okay, our human life's not perfect. Our human life's still got problems, for sure. We're in samsara, we're in cyclic existence. We're under the control of karma and delusion, but so we're still there, yeah, but so at least, but we have this consciousness, this nature, this Buddha potential, this subtle mind, different words to express it, this subtle consciousness that travels from life to life, it reincarnates, it has to go somewhere, right? So if we think about it, we have already gifted ourselves this life, even though it's filled with some strife and some challenges. We've gifted ourselves enough that we have a human life. We have been born up to now in a country where we have access to great spiritual teachings, teachers. Most of us, for the most part, have resources that we probably need, enough resources that we need. We have food, clothing, shelter. I mean, maybe we would like a bit more or something, but we have the basics. When we look around the world, we're in a fortunate situation. So what we say is, in light of the precious human rebirth teachings, we've gifted ourselves this life. So what we're trying to do, one of the main reasons for taking refuge, is to try and take care of this consciousness in a way where we gift ourselves another good future rebirth, at least as a human, at least in a situation where we can continue the development of our spiritual practice. We continue the development of our Buddha nature, and gradually, continually development of the path to enlightenment and these incredible qualities of bodhicitta and emptiness that we're going to, some of us have heard already, and some of us, we want to continue to grow them in the heart and mind, So this is kind of the 3 main ways that we develop the mind and the path. First of all, why do we take refuge? First of all, to ensure that our consciousness is at a level, we've done enough practice so that we're at a level where we can ensure a good future rebirth. As we have done, we've done it ourselves, we've gifted that ourselves for our past life. When I became a nun, I was all in my 20s, and I discovered that, you know, the Dharma at 25. I discovered after a year and a half I wanted to become a nun. It was very clear. And then I thought more about reincarnation. I thought, wow, thank you so much, past lives. Because this life, I hadn't done particularly anything up until that point in meeting the Dharma. You know, I just had a normal life. You know, I went to school, you know, I did my education, I went to uni, and then I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And I traveled, and somehow I got to India and met the Dharma. So then when I had realized I had this very strong connection and feeling and understanding of liberation and enlightenment, some kind of wish and aspiration for that, I was like, wow, what did I do past life for that? You know, so due to our practice, some kind of spiritual refuge and practice we have done in our past life, leaning on our spiritual refuge, practice, taking refuge, that has brought us to this place. And that's something for Westerners we need to think about. This is the teaching on precious human rebirth. Where we kind of start on our path is feeling very grateful for our present situation. Not that we don't recognize there's challenges, you know, but still feeling like we've got ourselves so far. We've got ourselves up the mountain of our delusions so far. You know, we've got into this precious human rebirth. As Pabonka Rinpoche said, from Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, that's one of the readings in the modules, in all the modules, one of the books that we rely on, we use for the readings. You know, it's like when we get a precious human life and light our spiritual development on the path to enlightenment. It's like we've in terms of going up a mountain, it's like we've taken the boulder halfway up the mountain. We're halfway there. That's a big spiritual leap, you know. We've done a lot of work so far. So the Lam, you know, so that's where we start on the Lam, recognizing that, acknowledging that, taking heart in that, using that happiness and gratitude that we feel for that to inspire the rest of the practice, inspire the rest of the path. So yeah, so that's kind of like refuge is also in that part of the practice. It's in the lower, the sort of lower capable being, the first part of the Lam Rim. So making sure that for our future life, our spiritual refuge, what that we understand by that, and our practice of that is deeper. It's quite deep, you know. It's got a depth that's going to carry us and take care of us for future lives. So we meet the Dharma again, we meet the teachings again, and we continue with the development of our Buddha nature. We continue with the development of this incredible peaceful state of mind that we can achieve, that is temporarily blocked by karma and delusion. It's two main causes of suffering. You know, and the 8 worldly dharmas are kind of the avenues how we continually block that by being too busy with those, too habituated with thinking that praise, gain, reputation doesn't mean that we can't receive them and take them, but not actively seeking them and relying on them to bring about a sort of some kind of longer happiness in life, really recognizing that their ability to do that is incredibly limited. How's that going? Any questions? Everybody's got their cameras off, so I can't see anybody. Oh yeah, we're back on again, good. Any questions? I think I went a little bit roundabout there, but I hope you got
Susan has
it.
one.
Susan.
Yeah, I have a question. I think it's a question, and that
Or
is
a comment. Yeah.
it's part of questioning the universe. And so you mentioned that you discovered like reincarnation and appreciated it right away. I don't think that way. It's hard for me to believe it. And this is the reason why. This is part of the reason why. You say subtle consciousness goes on to the next life. What keeps it coalescing? What makes it have that intent? It has some kind of intention to seek something out. What is it? Is it an energy field? And what coalesces it makes it stay together? And So that's future life. It's actually, I'm former Catholic and I've studied Buddhism for many, many years, but sort of contemplative Catholic. And it seems almost very similar to the idea of heaven. If you're good in this life, you go to a good place, you know?
Yes.
Which
So-
I don't believe in that whole concept of God. But past lives, I don't have a sense. I mean, I accept that as part of Buddhism, but I don't have, my mind doesn't easily go there. Let me just put it that way,
Yeah.
because I really don't understand how that can happen. And I know there are anecdotal evidence and stuff like that, but I just, it's part of questioning the universe.
Well, the universe is really in us. The main universe is our mind, you know.
It's what?
The main universe is really like in our mind, you know. We're almost like the creator of the universe. We create much with our mind, but that's maybe another topic. I did want to address, just to mention, it's not that I just immediately accepted reincarnation. I mean, coming from a Western culture, I didn't come from a religious background. I didn't immediately accept it. So just to mention that, you know, so you don't feel like, oh, well, everybody else is maybe getting it and I'm not. I don't know. You know, it takes time, you know, it takes time. So I went to India and I spent some years there, you know, with the preliminary teachings, purifying, meditating, reflecting on these things quite deeply. And at some point, you know, I got to this understanding from my own meditation practice, experience, going to teachings, questioning, looking at my mind in meditation, you know, I got to a point where you know, I could see that reincarnation was definitely possible, you know, that was a possibility. And generally for me, I couldn't point to any other reason why, from a family of my family who are not religious, you know, my friends, I didn't come from any of that kind of background. Why I would be religious this life? Where was that coming from? Other than karmic seeds and imprints from past life. Why am I in a privileged situation this life and others aren't? I couldn't accept the idea of a creator God, because obviously God would then put everybody in a privileged situation, you know. So again, one has to sit and question and think, which I think you have done, you know. And we may come to a different reasoning, you know, a different experience. But just to say, it wasn't something that just jumped from the very first Dharma course, you know. I had to put work and effort into that in my own practice, as we do with all these praxis, all these teachings need to be heard, need to be chewed and digested, and have that experience of that for yourself, you know. So that, I just wanted to mention that one main point. And I mean, I don't know if you were at the previous module on karma, because that answers quite a lot. I mean, it doesn't necessarily answer, but it gives you ways to think about why we come in the way we do, you know, how we come in the way we do. It's all basically based on the actions that we've created in our past lives, you know, our karma that we've created that brings us into a karmic world in this life. We're appearance of this life, where the good things, the bad things, what happens to us, what our propensities are, whether we're attracted to spiritual matters or not, and what they are. That's all very heavily dependent on our karma. I mean, I don't think I'm answering necessarily your questions, but just more like sharing where my understanding comes from, you know, from the Buddhist understanding and how I had to think about it. Does that help a little bit, Susan?
Yes, it does. It helps a lot. Thank you, Venerable, for breaking it out like that, explaining it that way. It makes more sense.
Okay.
You know? Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Scarlett?
Hello, Venerable.
Hi.
Hi. So I just wanted you to clarify, is you've been talking about the Lam Rim. So is that the same as like reading about the Vajrayana path, like the wheels, the four things that turn your mind? Is that what the Lam Rim is about? Because I'm reading this book right now called The Perfect Teacher by Three Rare Rinpoche.
Yes.
And like the things you talk about sounds like that's what this book is. So yeah, that's
Spot
what.
on.
Sorry, yeah, okay,
Spot on. It's
Okay.
it's a different, it's a beautiful book. That was one of the books I read for some time when I was in India doing retreat. I found it very inspiring, very beautiful.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
Patrul's life story is very beautiful. He was very humble, incredible practitioner of Lam Rim, So yes, that is also a book. We don't put that book on the reading list. It's from a different tradition, it's from the Nyingma tradition. He was a Nyingma
Yeah.
practitioner, but the essential teachings are the same. He talks about the preciousness of human life. You start with that, get a deep sense of that, So once we get some happiness from feeling like what we've done in the past and where we are now, getting a confidence that we've done a lot already. That's precious human life. For Westerners, we tend to not have a lot of confidence, self-confidence, a healthy confidence when we meet the spiritual path, And sometimes when we hear suffering, it's all very intense and I'm suffering already. I don't need to hear any more of that. So it's not really like, we do have to hear that. As I said, we need to be able to label. When we hear the two truths, it's like we're trying to label. When we study the Lam Rim, we're trying to see really what's going on in the mind and why we have these roadblocks to happiness. What are they? What are our blind spots? And we're trying within the Lam Rim to get out of those blind spots and develop the wisdom, develop the happiness. So from the very beginning, we want to develop a certain level of happiness, and that starts with the Precious Human Rebirth teachings.
So is there a book that like you can refer me to for the Lam Rim? Because I would like to have both using Patrol Rinpoche's Words of My Perfect Teacher and a
Yes.
Lam Rim book that you can recommend that I'd like to get. Because are these two stepping stones to practicing Tantra?
Yes, so usually in this tradition, we practice a combination. So we do move into, in the very last module, there's a module on Introduction to Tantra. So in the very last module, we will start, give an introduction to Tantra. That's what it's about, So, but the beginning, we need a foundation in Sutra, So the Lam Rim gives you foundation, in Sutra. We need these foundational teachings before we move into Tantra. And then as we progress as practitioners, we practice a combination of Sutra and Tantra, and that together is a very powerful combination, as the masters of the past have done. So when we meet the Tibetan teachings, sometimes they don't seem as simple as some other Buddhist traditions, so we have to be a bit patient. We have to persevere a little bit. But if we start to feel the richness of this tradition, just a little bit, just hold on to that. Because if we just a bit patient and try to take in the Lam Rim, we have to go, these kind of courses you have to go through maybe once, twice, 3 times. Well, I've been studying and practicing the Lam Rim for 25 years. There's no end to that. I mean, there is an end, yes, in a sense, but what it does is it just gets deeper and richer as you progress, as you keep doing it, and that's been my experience, as well as I think many of my Buddhist peers, monks and nuns, and it's very rich, as you keep going. But we need to be patient and persevere in the beginning, because it seems like a lot, and then we have to combine it with Tantra, which seems a lot, but it starts to fit together over some time, So another book would be good is, there's a few, Venerable Dundrup might come up, but Geshe Zopa has wonderful books, commentary on the Lam Rim Chemno. The one that's also, so there's that one, it's by Geshe Lundrup Zopa, and there's actually a few volumes of that. It's quite extensive. He gave those teachings on the Lam Rim over many years to a group of students in Wisconsin, and then they were put into a book, published. And there's also The Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, Paiba Bonka Rinpoche. And actually, you have the right approach, because that's how we're supposed to practice. We read one Lam Rim text and we get a little bit for that. Then we read another one on the same topic, and it talks about it in a different way. So it gives us a little bit more flavor to that.
Yes, I learned like that. That's how I learned.
So that's the best way, sit with 2 or 3 books, not to overwhelm yourself, but if you also
No.
find one that's really good, then you work with that, And as we get into purification practices and you purify your mind, you can look at a book one time, then you do some purification, you go back again. It's like, oh, that's just going in much deeper.
That's what I'm doing, actually.
So there's different you know, the Lam Rim as we progress just gets deeper and richer. But as beginners, we need to kind of just have patience and perseverance to go through the whole path and just get a broad, you know, a sort of general view. Then the next time you go through, gets a wee bit more specific and deeper. The next time a wee bit more specific. And it doesn't feel like it's so overwhelming. It just feels like it's very nice, pithy points, you know, that we pick up, you know, and but it's just patience and perseverance in the beginning to get some, you know, the basic points, you know, and other stuff sometimes you have to put on the shelf for a while. I've not got that yet, but I'm focusing on these key points, you know.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Okay. Okay, so we've got another few minutes. I think there's possibly one more just before finish, one more slide. A couple of more slides that we'll just cover. So taking refuge also, you know, doesn't mean that someone else is going to save us or remove our suffering. I mean, there's a huge amount that the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha do give us, and we're going to go through that. You know, what are the qualities of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha? So we get a huge amount by developing a refuge in them, you know, but they can't completely remove our suffering. I mean, we have to do work too, you know, and I think we all kind of probably get that on some level, you know. I think we all understand that, you know, we have to create our enlightenment. We have to create our happiness. They're simply like incredible guides and inspirations for us, and a support that we absolutely need, you know. So that's what we're going to cover in the next few classes. And what refuge is, as Lama Yeshe very nicely says, you know, it's a process of turning inward when we discover, we get excited about, we're happy about. It's like, wow, 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 I've got this unlimited potential for mind, you know, that isn't just going to take me to some heaven or, you know, it's true. Heaven is a place, you know, even in the Buddhist tradition, there is a place kind of like what we would call heaven that you can take your consciousness to, you know, if you create the causes and conditions. But we want to go beyond that because heaven's kind of more like we call a God realm. I think you'll cover that more in the samsara in the next module, your different realms of existence that you can incarnate into based on the karma we create. What we create in our life is where we go next life. Nobody else is creating it for us. It's what we create in our mind that brings us to our future life. What we have created has brought us here now. And that's amazing. That's wonderful. Something to, again, please take heart that you've done a lot of good stuff now. We're not perfect. We're not free of faults. So we just have to keep unpacking the faults, chipping away at the stuff. And there's a huge, exciting path forward, you know, when we get to bodhicitta and emptiness, you know. So taking refuge really is relying on the outer refuge of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha to cultivate a deeper conviction in all the possibilities of what this inner refuge can bring, you know, this Buddha mind, this Buddha potential. But we do need to rely on outer beings, you know, we need to rely on outer causes and conditions. For a simple analogy, you know, this is very simple, but it's that straightforward, it's that simple. You know, if we want to become an expert baker, so if we want to cook, if we want to, you know, cultivate all the qualities this Buddha nature, this potential has, you know, we need to rely on, as we do when we make quite, you know, this cake looks, I don't know, a wee bit complicated, you know, it's got different colours, different layers, you know, you have to cut it up in a certain way. The path's like that, it has layers, it has paths and grounds and boomies, there's all these parts, you know. So similarly, when we want to make a kind of elaborate cake, we want to become a really good baker and design all these like incredible you know, we need to rely on if we want to do something really good and expert, we want to take time to find good teacher, clear instructions, and also other people who are really into that. You know, so that's really what the Buddha Dharma Sangha is. You know, the Buddha's an expert in enlightenment. You know, he spent, if you read the Buddha's previous life stories, all the work he put in, all the sacrifice, all the different lifetimes dedicating towards achieving enlightenment. It's very inspiring, you know. So he's like, if we read about his life story, we can say, oh, wow, he's a really qualified teacher. Wow, wow, wow. I want to take refuge in him as a holy being, you know. is a great saint. And I want to take refuge in the clear instructions that he gave, the Lam Rim, you know, that's also been clarified. The Buddha came 2,500 years ago, but those instructions have been re-clarified for over the centuries. So in our time, we still understand them in our culture. And for our Western minds, we still get it, you know, we still see, because it's possible for all of us, but teachings 2,500 years ago, maybe not speaking to us, you know, exactly. So we need saints. We've had a lineage of saints in this tradition who have studied, practiced, and gained realizations. Wow, we have His Holiness right now, you know, so we're very, very fortunate. We have masters in this tradition who encompass like the qualities of the Buddha, you know, or very high level quality. And then we need a community. We very much need a community of people who are not like the Buddhas and great teachers, but you know, they've been treading this path, you know, they're like us, you know, or they're a bit more evolved than us, so we can rely on them for support. So, you know, that's why you feel Thupten Norbaling's so precious, you know, because you have teachers, you have teachings, you have Sangha. So we're taking refuge already. What we're going to explore in this module is this, how we continue to deepen, cultivate and open that practice of refuge, and how we start to kind of less rely and less believe in the illusion that other refugees, the 8 worldly dharmas. They're an illusion. You know, they're created by our consumer culture, you know, by the habitual habits that we created in past life that didn't work in past life, you know. So we want to sift away through them and open up this potential that's, you know, much more reliable, our inner refuge, and also by relying on the outer refuge. Okay. So just in a nutshell, that's where we're going to move on to next week. So to finish, sorry, we went slightly over time. We're just going to do a couple of I'm not sure what dedications you usually do, but we'll just recite a couple. I mean, we haven't covered the bodhicitta module yet, but we will go through that. And you will go through that, I'm sure, with other teachers later. So we're going to do just dedicate to develop bodhicitta is like basically the good heart, ultimate heart that, you know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama embodies. He's perfected bodhicitta. You know, we're still baby bodhisattvas, as Lama Yeshe would say. We're babies, and that's okay, you know. So we dedicate always to develop these two qualities. They're the goal, they're the aim, you know. So we just recite these 2 verses to dedicate together all the positive energy. So as we move through the modules, but especially through refuge, maybe we start to begin to understand what it means to take refuge in our sort of Buddha nature, in our Buddha quality and our potential, taking refuge more and more in our ability to achieve these 2 incredible states of mind, bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, as the main goals. So we'll just recite together. May the precious supreme bodhicitta, not yet born, arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. May the precious view of emptiness, not yet born, arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. And for His Holiness's long life, incomparable, kind, and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes spontaneously fulfilled. Okay, thank you so much for joining. And I guess for next week, you have the readings. I didn't prepare anything specifically for the readings, but there are some readings. I believe Venerable Dundrup's probably sent out the readings for you.
Should be on the event page.
So you can, okay, yeah. So just start to chip away at some of the readings if you have time. That would be wonderful. And yeah, if you have any questions or comments, please bring them next week. And next week, I'll kind of think a little bit more about the readings, but get a little bit more specific with some advice for the readings. But whatever you can manage to just do for next week will be wonderful. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.